My name is Brooklyn Carter. I'm 35 years old. That evening, the whole family sat around the dinner table, the air so heavy it felt like we were all holding our breath. My mother was complaining again about how I hadn't settled down, while my younger sister Madison went on and on about her brand new Audi. I stayed quiet, picking at my food, trying to swallow that all too familiar exhaustion. Then, the phone rang. I answered, and within seconds, the entire kitchen fell into dead silence. Congratulations, Miss Carter. You are now the official heir to an estate valued at nearly $50 million, left to you by Miss Margaret Jacobs. I gripped the phone, my heart pounding wildly. And the rest of them? My mother dropped her wine glass onto the tile floor. Madison froze mid-sentence. Ethan stared at me like he'd just seen a ghost. All their eyes locked onto me, suspicious, jealous, calculating. Should I tell them the truth? Or let them keep believing I was still the nobody they had always seen me as? Have you ever had one of those moments where your entire world shifts in an instant, all because of a single phone call? What would you do if you suddenly inherited a fortune, but couldn't trust a single person around you? Leave a comment below and hit like if your own family has ever turned their back on you. And don't forget to follow the channel to hear the full story of how I used silence to turn everything around. But for now, let me take you back to the beginning. I live in Denver, in a quiet neighborhood where winter rolls in with biting wind and bare trees lining the streets. I rent a second-floor apartment in an old brick building where the walls are chipped and the hallways smell musty whenever it rains. The place barely fits one person: a tiny bedroom, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a single window that looks out over the parking lot. My 2008 Corolla sits out there, occasionally screeching when the wind picks up. I kept telling myself I'd replace it when I had the money, but that day never seemed to come. Every morning, I wake up at 6. I make a pot of cheap coffee, eat a slice of toast, and put on my worn coat before stepping into the early morning fog. I work as an accountant for a small media company about a 30-minute drive from home. It's not a bad job, but there's not much room to grow. I'm good at what I do, punctual, meticulous, but no one really notices me. In their eyes, I'm the steady employee good enough to keep, not good enough to promote. My monthly paycheck covered rent, chipped away at the more than $30,000 in student loans I still owed, and left just enough for emergencies like car trouble or a dentist visit. I didn't spend on luxuries. All my clothes came from clearance racks. Eating out only happened when it absolutely had to, like a coworker's birthday or when Aunt Ruth came to town. I still remember Madison once, whispering to me at a fancy Italian birthday dinner, "You come to places like this? I thought you just ate sandwiches at your desk and went straight home." I forced a smile. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was used to it. My family always saw me as average, and by that they really meant invisible. My mother, Patricia, used to be a legal secretary, then quit when she married her current husband, Richard, the owner of a chain of golf resorts. In her eyes, a successful woman was one who could both keep a perfect home and stand gracefully beside a rich man in polished shoes at every holiday event. That wasn't me. I had no husband, no kids, no invites to elite galas or annual spa retreats. I was just me, living a life that barely held together, and to her, that was failure. I was used to the comparisons. Madison was pretty, top of her class, married a doctor. Ethan, our older brother, hadn't held a job in years, yet Mom still called him bright with potential. And me? Well, at least she doesn't cause trouble. One time, my company recognized me for catching a major accounting error that saved nearly $60,000. I was excited to share it at family dinner. But just as I finished, Madison cut in to brag that her husband had just been promoted to assistant director at the hospital. My story vanished beneath clinking glasses and polite laughter. I wasn't always passive. Once, I quit my job to study for a senior auditing certification, hoping for a better role. Even after passing the exam, I couldn't bring myself to apply to the bigger firms. It wasn't that I lacked skill, I had just spent so long being treated as insignificant, I started to believe it. Only one person ever looked at me differently, Aunt Ruth. She's my dad's younger sister, a retired elementary school teacher. She lives simply, with a tiny house and modest pension, but always with kindness. She never asked if I had a boyfriend, never made fun of my job, never told me to settle down. She listened, she asked, and she smiled when I talked about little things like a new bread recipe or a book I was reading. One rainy evening, we sat in her little kitchen, hands wrapped around mugs of tea. I told her how invisible I felt in my own family. "You're not invisible, Brooklyn," she said gently. "You just haven't been where people can truly see you." That night, I cried. Not loud, just quiet tears that slipped out after being bottled up for far too long. I live alone not because I hate people, but because I'm tired of chasing approval from those who'll never give it. I don't expect handouts. I just want to be seen. But in my family, that seems too much to ask. Once, Madison joked in front of her friends, "My sister's like the wallpaper in our family photo there, but no one notices." They laughed. I didn't. I wasn't angry. I just pulled away. Week after week, I went to work, came home, cleaned, did laundry, called Aunt Ruth, and reviewed the personal budget journal I'd kept for the last 5 years. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't have a group of friends calling me up. On Thanksgiving and Christmas, I still went to my mother's not because I expected warmth, but because it was the right thing to do. My life, as most people saw it, was a straight line. No highs, no drama, no color, until that call came. The one that silenced the laughter, froze the judgment, and opened a door no one in my family could have imagined. An estate worth nearly $50 million from someone they never thought would leave me a dime. And the wildest part? I never told them I even knew Margaret Jacobs, the woman who lived in the apartment below me for 3 years. The same one Madison called a creepy old bat and told me to stay away from. But Margaret, she saw me, when no one else did. And somehow, through her will, she changed my entire life. The question now isn't, what will I do with the money? It's, what will I do with the people who always believed I was nothing? I was born and raised in Denver, in a small 2-story house tucked inside an aging neighborhood where winter brought white-covered roofs and summer buzzed with cicadas and the smell of fresh-cut grass. As a kid, my parents were still together, though never truly happy. I remember dinners where no one made eye contact. My mom would wash dishes, my dad would step out to smoke, and I'd climb the stairs to do homework, learning to stay quiet far earlier than most children. When my dad passed away from a sudden stroke, I was just 15. My mother, Patricia, moved on fast. So fast, it made me feel like I was the weird one for still crying. Not long after, she met Richard, a successful businessman nearly 10 years her senior, who owned golf courses and luxury properties. They married less than a year after my father died. From that day on, it was like I'd been pushed to the sidelines of the family. Richard never once called me daughter. He was polite but cold, always using formal words like I and you with me, even though I lived under the same roof during the first 3 years of his marriage to my mom. Richard's just not someone who shows affection easily. "You have to understand," my mom would say whenever I felt distant. But I never needed him to love me like a real father. All I ever wanted was a look of acknowledgement, a sincere question about how I was doing. I didn't blame my mom for wanting a new life. What hurt was that she seemed to forget she had 3 children, one of them named Brooklyn. My brother, Ethan, was 22 at the time. He had dropped out of college and bounced between jobs, selling cars, working as a barista, flipping old electronics. He never lasted more than 3 months anywhere. But in my mom's eyes, Ethan was full of potential. Every time he failed, she comforted him with lines like, "Times are tough, but I'm so proud you're still trying." Meanwhile, I went to work every day, held down my job, paid my bills on time, and all I got was, "Well, at least you're not causing trouble." When Ethan racked up so much credit card debt he got sued, Mom stepped in and paid it off, even gave him a little extra, to help get a fresh start. I saw her write him a check for $10,000. The same woman who had refused to lend me $100 to fix my car, saying, "You should learn to plan ahead." So I learned not to ask for anything. And then there was Madison. She was 5 years younger than me. Always pretty, always quick on her feet, always treated like a precious gem. She did well in school, had smooth social skills, and just like Mom, always dreamed married a successful man. Paul, Madison's husband, was a medical resident when they met. Now he's head of internal medicine at a private hospital. I still remember the look in my mom's eyes at Madison's wedding. She held my hand and whispered with tears in her eyes, "Your sister is so lucky. This is all I ever wanted in life." I wore a dress to the party. I smiled and raised my glass like everyone else. But inside, something sank. No one asked if I was tired after driving 2 hours to get there. No one noticed I was seated at the far edge of the hall, with distant relatives and Paul's old college friends. After the guests left, I stayed behind to clean up, collect the gifts and cards, and pack the leftover cake into the fridge. Madison even asked me to front $2,000 to pay the band because Paul forgot his card. She said, "We'll pay you back after the honeymoon." But weeks passed, then months, then years, and not a cent was ever returned. I no longer had the courage to bring it up. There were moments when I genuinely thought maybe I was invisible in this family. I showed up in the group photos. I got the invites. I heard the thank yous when I house sat or fixed the printer. But my presence was always treated as expected, never appreciated. When I announced I'd passed my audit certification, something I'd studied for tirelessly, night after night, for 8 months, my mom just nodded and then turned to Madison to ask if she planned to enroll her daughter in bilingual preschool. Only Aunt Ruth remembered. She called me the day she heard, voice glowing with pride. "I'm so proud of you, Brooklyn. I knew you'd do it." Aunt Ruth was different from the rest of the family. She lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building, with books stacked high on wooden shelves. She didn't have a new car, didn't travel far, but she always made time for me. She remembered my birthday. She remembered I liked spiced pear cake and that I always forgot my coat when it got cold. Once I asked her why. She'd never married. She smiled, eyes soft and far away. "I've been in love before. But not everyone who loves you is meant to walk beside you. What matters is living kindly, Brooklyn." It was during those quiet afternoons by her window, listening to the wind slip through the cracks and smelling her gentle floral tea, that I finally felt peace. She never asked me when I'd get married or buy a house. She just asked, "Are you doing okay?" Or, "Have you been feeling sad lately?" The questions I always longed to hear from my mother but never did. So, after that life-changing phone call, the first person I thought of wasn't my mom. It wasn't Ethan or Madison. It was Aunt Ruth, not because I wanted to brag, but because I wanted to share something huge with the only person who had ever truly listened, who had believed in me when I had nothing. And when my entire family went silent after hearing I'd inherited nearly $50 million, when their eyes, I suddenly looked at me like I was treasure. Disguised as a human, I had just one thought in my heart. Which of them would still see me the same, now that I was no longer the one with nothing? The first time my family started using me wasn't marked by a shocking betrayal. It began with small things. A polite request. A promise to pay me back soon. A desperate look. Then, slowly, it became routine. And I became a walking wallet. Ethan was the one who started the chain of loans with no return dates. At the time, I'd just landed a steady job as an accountant at a media company. He had, as usual, just lost another job. He called me one early winter evening, voice panicked like someone being chased. "Brooke, I'm in trouble. Big trouble." I remember leaving my half-heated dinner, throwing on a coat, and driving over to his basement apartment. When I got there, the lights were still off. He was sitting hunched in the dark, head in his hands. "What's going on?" I asked. He handed me a credit card debt letter, over $15,000. I remember exactly what he said next. "I just need $5,000. Enough to keep the account from going to court. I swear I'll pay you back, on Dad's name." I didn't ask questions. I went home, opened my savings account, and withdrew almost everything I'd spent 2 years saving money I'd set aside to replace my car. 3 months later, I found out Ethan hadn't used the money to pay off the card. He'd blown most of it on poker nights in Las Vegas. A friend of his casually mentioned it when I called to check in. I didn't confront Ethan, no yelling, no blame. Just a quiet shift inside me, a seed of doubt that started to grow. Madison was different. She didn't cry, she didn't plead. She acted like it was expected. "Hey sis, I need a little extra for the wedding decorations. Paul's side already paid their share. I promise we'll pay you back after the honeymoon." It was $2,000. I gave it without thinking, not wanting my little sister to stress on her big day. I sat in the third row at the ceremony, watching Madison in her sparkling white gown walk down an aisle lined with white roses and vintage chandeliers. The whole wedding looked like something out of a magazine. She was a fairy tale princess. I smiled and told myself, as long as she's happy. But months passed, then years. Nothing came back. When I gently brought it up once, Madison laughed softly. "Oh, wow. I thought you'd forgotten. We've had so many expenses lately. Paul wants to redo the kitchen." Then she changed the subject, like I was being ridiculous for even asking. I smiled, nodded, but something inside cracked something that never fully healed. As for my mom, she didn't cry or beg. She used something much heavier: expectations. "Brooklyn, the roof on the old house is starting to leak. You know I'm retired, and Richard's busy with the new resort project. I figured if everyone chipped in, it wouldn't be too hard on anyone." I didn't hesitate. Mom was right. If everyone gave a little, it would be fair. I sent her $1,500, cutting into the money I'd set aside for my annual health checkup. 2 weeks later, Madison posted family photos on Instagram. A beach resort in Santa Barbara. Mom in a floral dress, sitting next to Richard holding a glass of wine under a glowing sunset. Caption: "Finally, some time to relax. We deserve this." I stared at that photo in silence. No one in the picture mentioned the leaking roof. No one invited me on that vacation. And clearly, no one felt the need to say thank you. I didn't say a word. But from that day on, something shifted quietly inside me. I became cautious. I didn't open my wallet as easily. I no longer believed that blood ties automatically meant genuine love. I started keeping a record of everything I'd given, not to demand anything back, but to remind myself of what I had once offered. I used to think that family was something solid, the one thing you could lean on when life knocked you down. But the older I got, the more I realized not everyone in your family values you the way you imagine. To them, I was the sister, the daughter, the one they could ask for help when needed, the one to lean on when things got tough. But when I needed someone, all I got was silence. The only time I tried to say any of this out loud was at my mom's birthday last year. The whole family had gathered at a restaurant. I had just started to mention some of the financial pressure I'd been under lately when Ethan cut in with a story about getting scammed in crypto. Everyone gasped and started talking over each other. I just sat there quietly, spooning another bite of cold cake into my mouth, swallowing it along with the lump in my throat. Only Aunt Ruth turned to me and placed her hand over mine. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I nodded, like I always did, but my eyes stayed glassy all the way home that night. That's why, when the lawyer called to say I was the sole beneficiary of Margaret, the elderly neighbor downstairs, I used to help with her mail and groceries every week, I felt shocked, confused, and deeply grateful. Because finally, someone had seen me. Someone who wasn't family, who didn't share my bloodline, who never made promises, but had chosen to trust me with everything she had. And the people who wore the title of family? All they had done for years was take, expect, and quietly look away when I needed them most. I asked myself, if I went to them now and said, "I need help," who among them would reach out not to count my money, but to lift me up? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. The call came on a Monday morning, just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee and settling in at my desk to check emails. The screen hadn't even lit up yet when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize from downtown Denver. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. Hello, am I speaking with Miss Brooklyn Carter? The man's voice was clear, polite, and carried the cadence of someone in a suit. Yes, this is she, I replied, still wary. My name is Mark Delaney, attorney with Delaney and Harper. I'm calling to inform you that Mrs. Margaret Jacobs, your former neighbor from the building you lived in, passed away 3 days ago. In her will, she named you as the sole heir to her entire estate, including investment accounts, property holdings, and other assets. The current estimated value is approximately $48 million. I froze. I thought I misheard. My mind went blank, eyes locked on the steam rising from my coffee mug. I'm sorry, what did you say? I understand this is unexpected. If you'd like confirmation, we can provide full documentation and a statement from the asset management bank. But yes, you are the sole beneficiary. Mrs. Jacobs signed the will over a year ago and never amended it. I don't remember exactly what I said next. Probably some stammered thank you. Maybe I just scheduled a meeting. When I hung up, I felt completely unmoored. I stood up, pacing between the kitchen and living room, my hands clenched and unclenched. All I could think was, almost $50 million. I knew Margaret. Of course I did. She was the petite woman who lived beneath my old apartment for 3 years. I used to carry her groceries when the elevator broke, change the batteries in her remote, sometimes grab her milk and meds when the rain was too heavy. She was gentle, private, lived alone with her cat named Oliver, and watered her plants every Friday afternoon. I never imagined she had money. I certainly never dreamed she would leave her entire estate to me. Just a few weeks ago, I had taken her to urgent care after she got dizzy in the elevator. I waited with her for 3 hours in the ER. When I asked why she didn't call family, she simply shook her head and said softly, I had a nephew once, but he stopped calling a long time ago. You know, Brooklyn, sometimes a kind stranger is worth more than someone who shares your DNA. I thought she was just being poetic. Now I understood what she meant. I sat down and stared into the empty space ahead. Should I be happy or scared? Nearly $50 million isn't something someone like me can even grasp. I'd lived my whole life budgeting every dollar at the grocery store. Money had always been this fragile, elusive thing. And now, it was falling from the sky given by someone who had never expected anything in return. But something gnawed at me. My family. What would they say if they found out? How would I explain? And, more importantly, should I even tell them? I thought back to the look Madison gave me when I shared I'd gotten a $200 monthly raise. She smirked. Wow, so even you get noticed now? I remembered the way Ethan stared at me like I was joking when I refused to loan him another $5,000. You live alone. No kids, don't tell me you can't help your brother out. I remembered how my mom looked at me, eyes drifting toward Richard like she needed his approval, before saying, you keep hiding behind those boring spreadsheets, and one day, no one will remember your name. They never believed I could be worth more than the labels they stuck on me. And now, in a single phone call, those limits had been shattered. I could pay off every debt. I could quit my job. I could buy a house, a car, go back to school, even fly to Paris just to sip coffee on some cobblestone street. I could do anything. But the first thing I did was shut down every social media account. I deleted photos, changed my email, switched to a private phone number for all contact with the law firm. I knew that if this got out, it wouldn't be good news anymore. It would become a storm. 3 days later, I walked into Mark Delaney's office to finalize the inheritance process. The firm was in a sleek high-rise downtown. I sat across from him in a leather chair. He had salt and pepper hair and steady, professional eyes. Miss Carter, he said, opening a thick file. I've worked with many clients in situations like this. I'll be blunt. The hardest part isn't managing the money, it's managing the people around it. I nodded. You can receive the inheritance in your name, or we can establish an anonymous trust. The second option keeps your identity private, minimizes legal risks, and helps avoid unwanted attention. So, if I choose the second option, I asked slowly, my family won't know anything at all? Exactly. he replied. If you don't tell them, they'll have no way of finding out, unless you intentionally expose it. I looked at the window behind him, where the city stretched out in a hazy blur beneath a gray sky. Cars passed, people crowded at the red light, faces brushing past one another in a hurry. I thought about those family dinners, the broken promises, the indifferent glances when I just needed a word of encouragement. Then I thought of Mrs. Margaret, someone nearly a stranger who had trusted me more than anyone in my family ever had. We'll go with the second option, I said clearly. I want to keep this private, at least for now. You just made a very smart decision, he smiled, and a brave one. I pressed my lips together and nodded. Inside, I still felt a bit of fear, but also something I had never felt before: control. A week after the meeting with Delaney's office, I was referred to meet attorney David Miller, a specialist in trust planning, investments, and asset protection for individuals who suddenly came into significant wealth. His office was on the 21st floor of a glass high-rise near Denver's financial district. Everything there was tidy and quiet, with soft amber lighting and the faint scent of oak in the air. I didn't wait long before a man walked out tall, with neatly combed gray hair, and an air of calm that made me trust him instantly. Miss Carter? I stood and shook his hand. Yes, that's me. Pleasure to meet you. Please, come on in. We walked down a long hallway, then entered a small, fully soundproof meeting room. Mr. Miller poured me a cup of hot tea, then sat down across from me and opened a thick folder on the table. I've reviewed the file Delaney's office sent over. And I want to start with this. Anyone in your situation, no matter their age, background, or career, would feel overwhelmed. I nodded. I still don't believe it's real. He smiled. Trust me, it's very real. And also very dangerous, if not protected properly. For the next 3 hours, I felt like I was in a real-life class I never imagined I'd need: how to establish an anonymous trust, how to invest so the money doesn't lose value, how to safeguard your digital identity, and even how to check home surveillance cameras for signs of unusual monitoring. Mr. Miller explained each topic slowly, patiently answering every question I had, from whether I should move to whether it was possible to pay Aunt Ruth's medical bills from a new account without her knowing. You don't need to change everything right away, he said. In fact, the best thing you can do now is change nothing. Keep your habits, keep your job, even keep your hairstyle if possible. The only thing that needs to change is the internal structure. And the first step we take is creating the trust. A few days later, the Brook Foundation was established as an anonymous trust. My name appeared on no public documents. The funds were distributed into 3 main accounts: long-term investments, personal reserves, and a future charitable foundation. I still went to work every morning, still drove my old Corolla to the office, still used my old phone with a monthly bill, still ate lunch alone at the corner table by the window. No one suspected a thing. But one thing had changed. I began seeing everything through different eyes. Each time my mom called, her voice steady as always, I listened more carefully. Where was the genuine concern, and where was calculation? Each time Ethan texted asking to borrow electronics, I noted the timing, his tone, the way he dodged bringing up old debts. Each time Madison called complaining about her poor nanny troubles or the cost of patio repairs, I didn't find it funny anymore. I saw clearly how she lived in her own world and how I had never really belonged to it. And then a thought began to take root inside me. At first, it was fleeting, but day by day it grew louder, clearer. I wondered, if I were someone in crisis, not a hidden millionaire, but just the old, broke Brooklyn who just lost her job, how would my family react? Would they care about me because I was family? Or would they look away, like they always had? I shared the idea with David Miller during a later consultation. What do you think? I asked, if I pretend I need help, just to see who actually cares? He didn't answer right away. He poured more tea into my cup and sat in thoughtful silence. Do you want the truth? He said slowly. Or are you trying to punish someone? I went quiet for a few seconds. I don't want to punish anyone, I said softly. I just don't want to share the most valuable things in my life with people who only ever saw me as a backup option. He nodded. If you decide to do this, do it thoroughly, and only once. You won't want to live in doubt forever. I left the office that day with a heavy heart, but also with more clarity than ever. I was going to try, not to prove a point, but to find out, once and for all, who I could truly keep close and who I needed to let go. I started drawing up a plan. I took notes on every step, every word I'd use, every possible scenario. I didn't want any part of it to feel staged. I needed it to feel real. Our company's chief accountant had just resigned. I'd say I was laid off due to budget cuts, being one of the last hires on the team. I'd add that I didn't get my final paycheck because the company froze funds. I'd say I'd been feeling a little sick, needed some tests done, but my health insurance had lapsed, so I had to pay out of pocket. The total amount I needed, $5,000, not enough to scare anyone off, but just enough to test for real care. I made a list of the people I would call: my mother, Ethan, Madison, Richard, and finally Aunt Ruth. I knew it would hurt. I also knew that deep down, a part of me still hoped someone would surprise me, but I no longer bet my emotions on vague hopes. I wanted the truth, and I was ready to hear it. I launched the plan on a Saturday afternoon. The rain had just stopped after a gloomy day, the pavement still slick with water, and the wind carried a chill that hinted at the changing season. I sat in my small apartment, the old heater ticking quietly in the corner, my hands going over the script one last time in a brown leather notebook. I had practiced my voice to sound just right, shaky enough, tired enough, but still holding on to the pride that someone like me would naturally carry. I didn't want to sound like I was begging. I wanted them to feel I was someone trying to stay dignified during a hard time, someone who would only come to family when there were no other options. The script I'd prepared was precise. I just lost my job last week. The company's going through financial trouble and laid off almost the entire department. I'm still looking, but nothing's solid yet. My doctor also told me I need to get some tests done because of a few odd symptoms. I don't have insurance anymore. Rent's coming due. I need to put down a deposit for the medical bills. I need about $7,000 to get through the next few weeks. I started with my mother, Patricia. She always claimed to be the one who sacrificed everything for her children, and never once said no when Madison or Ethan needed anything. I wanted to see how she'd react when I was the one in need. I called in the evening, knowing she'd finished dinner, and was probably watching her favorite show next to Richard. "Hi, Mom. It's me," I said, keeping my voice soft. "Brooklyn, how are you, honey? You sound off. Is everything okay?" I recounted the story just as I had prepared, each detail carefully woven in. I heard a spoon clink against a glass on the other end. Mom was silent for a few seconds, then sighed softly. "Oh dear. No one ever knows what tomorrow holds. Have you applied for unemployment benefits yet?" "I have, but it takes a few weeks to process. In the meantime, I really need some help to get by." She didn't respond right away, her tone lowered to a whisper, probably to keep Richard from overhearing. "Sweetheart, Richard and I just put down a deposit on a vacation home in Flagstaff last week. Money's a bit tight right now. But maybe try calling Madison? Paul's doing well. They might be able to help a little." I bit my lip. "I understand. I was just asking. I'll talk to Richard, see if we can shuffle some things around, but I'm not making any promises, okay?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thanks, Mom." I hung up and wrote down every reaction in my notebook. She hadn't outright refused, but her first instinct wasn't to help, it was to pass the responsibility. That "I'm not making any promises" cut deeper than a direct no. I moved on to Richard, my stepfather. I sent him a short message since he wasn't one for phone calls. I kept it simple. "Richard, I'm going through a tough time. If possible, I need about $7,000 to cover medical bills and rent. Hope to hear from you soon." 3 days passed without a word. On the 4th day, he finally replied with a single line: "Financial matters should be handled by your mother. I'm not involved." No punctuation, no warmth. I read that line over and over like it was confirmation of what I'd long suspected. To him, I was never part of the circle worth caring about. Next was Ethan. I called in the afternoon, knowing he'd likely be home. Hello? Hey Ethan, it's me. What's up? You okay? I told him the same story I had told Mom, keeping my voice just heavy enough without sounding desperate. Ethan gave a little chuckle on the other end, a sound I knew too well. Half pity, half annoyance. Brooke, I'm just being real here. You live alone, no kids, no one depends on you. If you can't take care of yourself, who will? I didn't say anything. He went on. I'm already behind on a bank loan from last month car repairs. And I lost a bunch on that crypto investment. If I had the cash, I'd send it. But right now, I just can't. I understand, I said softly. You've got your own stuff. Yeah, exactly. Hang in there, sis. I ended the call before emotion could rise. A tear rolled down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it. I let it fall, like washing away another piece of hope. Madison was the last in the close family circle. I waited until Friday night, when I knew she'd just picked up the kids and was prepping for her usual weekend gathering. What's up, sis? Everything okay? Madison said quickly, the sound of pots and pans clattering in the background. I need help with something. I told her everything, adding just a bit of hesitation when I talked about the health issue, not to exaggerate, but to show I was genuinely afraid. Madison was quiet longer than I expected. How much are we talking? She finally asked. 7,000. I know it's a lot. Yeah, we just paid tuition for the kids' new semester. And Paul's trying to redo the fence. I'm not sure. I get it. Maybe, if you need a place to crash for a few weeks, you could stay here. The guest room's a little cramped, our youngest sleeps with us now, so her room's open. No need. I'm trying to handle this. I was just asking. Madison hesitated. I'll talk to Paul. But don't count on it too much, okay? He's kind of strict about money stuff. Okay, thanks. When I ended the call, my heart felt heavy. That offer to let me stay over sounded like a solution, but really, it was a way to dodge financial responsibility, and I knew Paul would be the reason that money never came. I sat in silence, the soft yellow light from the kitchen casting a glow on my open notebook. Under each name, I wrote quick notes. Mom, polite refusal. Pass the buck. Richard. Silent, then dismissed me. Ethan, judgmental, walked away. Madison, empty offer, blamed Paul. Only one name was left to call. Aunt Ruth. The only person I believed could change how this page looked. But I still hesitated, because I was scared. I was scared that if even she said no, it would mean I had truly always been alone. I held the phone in my hand, my thumb hovering above the screen, hesitating like every tap might shift something deep inside me. Aunt Ruth was the last name on the list, but for me, she was the hardest test. Not because I doubted her, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if she turned away too, the loneliness I'd carried for years would become a truth I could no longer deny. But I knew I had to see this through. I couldn't back out halfway. I pressed call. Brooklyn? Her voice was as warm as ever, like time had never chipped away any of the kindness in her. Are you busy, Auntie? I asked softly, trying to keep my voice steady. No, I made a pot of tea. What's going on, sweetheart? I hesitated for a few seconds. I have something I need to talk about. Go ahead, I'm listening. I repeated the same story I'd told the other four, same details, same tone, but my throat tightened more than ever. I wasn't acting anymore. I couldn't. The words poured out, no longer sharp like part of a plan, but shaky and more real than I expected. I lost my job. I also had some tests done. The doctor said they need to run more. My insurance has expired, rent's due soon, and I just can't make it. I didn't know who else to call. There was silence for a few seconds on the other end. Then Aunt Ruth asked softly, How much do you need? Around 7,000. She didn't say, Oh my goodness. Didn't ask. What did you spend so much on? Didn't wonder. Where are your parents? She simply said, as gently as if this were the most normal thing in the world. Stay home. I'll stop by tomorrow. I'll bring you some cash. Not much, but enough to keep you afloat for now. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The lump in my chest broke apart into silent tears. Auntie, you really don't have to. Brooklyn, she cut in, her voice suddenly firmer. Family is who you turn to when you're at your lowest. I don't have much, but I have you. I pressed my lips together, holding back a sob. I didn't leave the apartment that whole day. I didn't do anything except sit by the window, holding the notebook where I had written down everyone's responses. The next morning, around 8 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Aunt Ruth stood there, wrapped in a gray knit coat, her silver hair tied neatly, holding a worn canvas bag. I came by early. Hope I'm not disturbing you. No, I'm really glad you did. She walked in and handed me a thick envelope. I looked at it and shook my head. Auntie, I can't. Accept this. Take it. It's $2,000. From my retirement savings. I know it's not enough, but if you need more, I'll figure something out. And if you need a place to stay, there's still a spare bed at my house. You live alone. Why would you do this for me? She sat down in the armchair and looked me straight in the eyes. Because you're one of the rare kind ones in this family. Because you never ask anyone for anything. Because if you're reaching out now, I know you've already tried your best. I sat beside her, tears streaming down my face. You're the only one who didn't ask questions, who didn't blame me, who didn't look at me like a burden. She smiled gently, her eyes glistening. You know, when your father passed away, your mom once said something I'll never forget. I guess I'll have to rely on Brooklyn, but she's too slow to be of use. You were only 15, and I remember thinking, how could anyone expect a child to carry the weight of an entire family? I don't know how long I sat there next to her that day, but I felt seen. She asked about my job, my health, my feelings, not like she was checking a box, but like every question was a thread of love pulling us closer. You're going to be okay, she said as she got ready to leave. But you need to learn who's really in your corner. I nodded. I had written everything down, and in that moment my heart was calmer than it had been in a long time. That same afternoon, I received a text from Madison. Heard you called everyone asking for money? Is it true you lost your job? Why didn't you just say that up front? Then came a call from Ethan. You called Madison, Mom, even Richard? What, trying to guilt us into helping? My mom also called, her voice full of irritation. Brooklyn, please stop making everyone think you're pathetic. Do you know how worried you've made the whole family? I didn't respond. I turned off my phone. That evening, I sat under the soft glow of my kitchen light, rereading the notebook where I had recorded everyone's reactions. I marked each name, Mom, shifted responsibility, preserved family image, Richard, dismissed, cut ties, Ethan, judgmental, indifferent, Madison, fake concern, turned me into gossip, Aunt Ruth, acted immediately, no conditions, no hesitation. On the last line, I wrote one more sentence. She didn't ask what I had, only what I needed. And I knew. In what had started out as a cold-hearted experiment, I had found something truly warm. It wasn't in the money, it was in how people treat you when there's nothing to gain. I spent the entire night thinking about how to begin. The story I was about to share wasn't the kind you tell lightly, and certainly not to just anyone. But I knew if there was one person I could be honest with, it was Aunt Ruth. The next morning, I called her. Are you free? I'd like to take you out. For dinner. Same spot near the park. You're treating me this time? She chuckled, her voice as warm as early autumn sunlight. This one's important, Auntie. Please don't say no. Okay, I won't. 6 o'clock sound good? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and quietly began preparing for the most important dinner of my life. We met at our usual diner, the one that served simple but hearty meals: Southern barbecue, mashed potatoes, steamed greens, and apple pie for dessert. Aunt Ruth looked just like always, wearing her faded green sweater and a hand-embroidered scarf. I ordered our regular dishes, but my hand trembled slightly as I picked up my glass. "You seem a bit nervous," she said, resting her hand lightly on mine. I looked at her for a long moment, feeling like I was standing at a crossroads in my life. Then I took a deep breath. "Auntie, there's something I need to tell you, and I'm not sure how you'll feel after I do." She tilted her head slightly. "Go ahead, I'm listening." I told her everything from the lawyer's call, to the meetings at the financial office, to the nearly $50 million Margaret had left me. I explained slowly, leaving out no detail. And when I reached the part about setting up a trust to keep it secret, my voice quivered. I didn't tell anyone. Only I knew. But after everything that happened, after testing the whole family, I realized, if there's one person I can be completely honest with, it's you. She was silent for a long time. So long, I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my chest. Finally, she let out a slow breath. "So, Margaret, she left it all to you." I nodded. "I don't really know why. I just helped her a few times, but she said I was the only one who remembered her, who treated her like a real person." Aunt Ruth gave a gentle nod. "She lived alone for a long time. Everyone knew that. But you were one of the rare few who still knocked on her door, still asked if she needed anything." I lowered my head. "I didn't do it expecting anything in return." "I know," she said, looking at me with eyes soft and deep like a quiet lake. "It's because you didn't expect anything that you were given something. That's how life works in its own way." I gripped my hands together. "You're not mad at me, are you? For keeping it a secret?" She let out a soft laugh and shook her head. "Why would I be mad at you for that? I'm only sad that you had to carry something so big all by yourself." I paused. For the first time in all the months since the inheritance, I was with someone who didn't ask what I planned to do with the money, who didn't ask who I'd give it to, how much I'd keep, or how I'd invest it. Aunt Ruth didn't ask, didn't pry. She just worried how long I'd been carrying that weight alone. We ate in silence for a while. Then she gently placed her fork down. "I'll tell you something, just once," she said, her eyes drifting toward the window. "I used to have a pretty solid retirement fund. Not as much as you now, but enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Back when I was still married, I handed it all over to my ex-husband. He said he'd invest it, grow it, buy us a house, secure our future." She paused, her eyes going still. "But he put it into a new restaurant chain his best friend was launching. I didn't know anything until the bankruptcy papers came in. The money was gone, the friend disappeared. And my husband said, 'It was our money. If the investment fails, we both lose.'" My throat tightened. I divorced him after that. No one in the family took my side. They said I was making a big deal out of nothing. That in marriage, you win some, you lose some. I didn't argue. I just quietly started over. I didn't know what to say. I just reached over and took her hand. "That's why," she said, gently squeezing mine. "When you told me your story, I wasn't shocked by the money. I was shocked that you still had such a whole heart. In a family that hurt it so badly." I cried. Not out of pity or anger, but because someone finally understood. She looked at me, smiling softly. "Money is a double-edged sword. It gives you freedom, but it tests you every minute. I won't tell you what to do with it. But if you can, use it to live well and help those who deserve it. The way you helped Miss Margaret, the way you never gave up on yourself." I nodded, my eyes blurred with tears. "You don't have to hide it anymore," she whispered. "At least not from me." We stayed for a long time that night. Aunt Ruth never asked how much I had, never hinted at borrowing, never mentioned dividing anything. She just asked, "Are you happy?" And I was finally able to say, "I'm on my way." I chose a cool Saturday evening to host the dinner I'd been thinking about for weeks. I prepared everything myself: Texas-style barbecue, oven-baked cinnamon, apple pie, and a bottle of red wine I'd saved since last year. I set the table carefully, lit a few small candles, and played soft jazz in the background. It felt a little formal, but I still wanted warmth. I called each member of the family, Mom, Richard, Ethan, Madison, and of course, I couldn't forget Aunt Ruth. I said I had good news to share, that I'd found a new job and wanted to invite everyone to dinner to celebrate. Patricia, my mother, seemed surprised but agreed right away. Oh, I'm happy for you, Brooklyn. Are you doing better these days? Her question sounded caring, but it reminded me that when I truly needed her, she hadn't been there. Madison texted back with a clapping emoji and said, "Hope dessert's not that old school pudding again." Ethan didn't reply, but I figured he'd show up free food and drinks always brought to him around. Only Aunt Ruth asked me honestly, "Are you sure you want them to come? Are you really okay?" I smiled and answered, "I'm okay, and I need to do this." That evening, I wore a simple navy blue dress, a little lipstick, and the earrings Miss Margaret had once given me. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to feel grounded in my own space. They arrived one by one. Madison came first, immediately glancing around the apartment like she was inspecting the furniture. "Wow, this place looks better than before. Finally got new curtains?" she said, eyes scanning the old sofa set. I just smiled. "Yeah, I think they match the afternoon light." Richard came with my mother, wearing an expensive overcoat. He didn't bother shaking my hand, just muttered, "Hi," and walked straight to the dining room like he owned the place. My mother gave me a light hug, her eyes wary. "You're looking better," she said. "I guess this new job's giving you some motivation, huh?" Ethan showed up last, a beer bottle already in his hand, not even bothering to close the door behind him. "Anyone bring ice?" "I'm dying of thirst here." He looked around, then casually dropped into a chair, leaning back like it was his home. We sat down to eat. The clinking of forks and glasses filled the room. Small talk floated here and there. I let everyone eat comfortably before I spoke. I looked at each of them, and when my eyes met Aunt Ruth's, I felt steady from the warmth in her gaze. I tapped my glass and stood up. "Everyone, thank you for coming. Tonight, it's not just about celebrating the new job." I paused, catching the way my mom's eyes narrowed slightly. "I have a few things to share. And maybe it's time they were said." Madison jumped in right away. "Oh my gosh, you're getting engaged? That would be great, sis. You're not getting any younger." I shook my head. "It's not about dating. It's about family. And me." The room paused. I know I told you all I'd been struggling, and honestly, I was. I said I lost my job, needed help with medical bills, with rent, and I called each person in this room, asking for help. The table shifted slightly with uneasy murmurs. I looked at my mother. "You said you didn't have any money because you and Richard were investing in the vacation home." Then I turned to Richard. "And you looked me in the eye and said, 'You're not my daughter. Don't expect anything from me.'" I faced Ethan. "You pretended to care, then texted me asking to borrow another $1,000. Then Madison. "You said, 'Don't worry,' but then turned my asking for help into gossip for your friends, saying, 'Every time she opens her mouth, it's to beg for something.'" Madison flushed. "I didn't. They asked me, so I told the truth. I have a family. Little kids, it's not easy. And I don't have feelings?" I shot back, looking straight at my sister. "I'm a person too. Sometimes I need a hand." But all I got was avoidance, blame, and coldness. My mother sat up straighter, her voice higher than usual. "Brooklyn, you can't blame everyone. People have their reasons. Not everyone has money to spare. You're an adult. You need to handle things yourself." "Yes. And that's exactly why I'm saying this starting now. I will handle things myself." I enunciated every word. "I don't need anyone in this room to help me anymore. And I won't keep letting myself be used, treated like a backup plan, or turned into a dumping ground for everyone's disappointments." Ethan scoffed. "Wow, Sounds like you're giving a speech. Richard smirked. So, you got a new job and now you want to lecture the whole family? My mother stared at me. You've changed, Brooklyn. You're not the obedient daughter anymore. I met her eyes. No, you're mistaken. I haven't changed. I've just stopped enduring. None of them knew I was the heir to nearly $50 million. None of them could have guessed that the woman standing in front of them, the one they'd called weak, a burden, could now buy their entire neighborhood without a bank loan. All they saw was a woman who was stronger, more resolute, and no longer needed them. And that bothered them more than poverty ever did. Aunt Ruth was the only one who said nothing. She just looked at me, lips pressed together, pride shining in her eyes. When dinner ended, everyone left quietly. No hugs, no thank yous. But that was fine. I was used to it. I walked Aunt Ruth to her car. Before getting in, she took my hand. You did the right thing. And you know what? You just got yourself back not because of money, but because you know your worth. I looked at her, my heart brimming with gratitude. Under the soft yellow light of the porch, I stood there for a long moment, listening as her car faded down the quiet street. Dinner was over, but something new had begun. A year after that fateful evening, my life had quietly turned a page. Not flashy, not loud, but fuller than anything I'd imagined. I didn't move into a mansion, didn't buy a luxury car, didn't travel the world. I chose a small two-bedroom house with a simple red tile roof on the edge of town, just a few blocks from Aunt Ruth's place, beneath old oak trees. I painted the white fence myself, planted a row of lavender by the porch, and every morning brewed coffee in the vintage glass pot I'd once seen in Margaret's kitchen. The house wasn't big, but it caught the morning light and held the kind of quiet nights filled with crickets and the wind rustling through leaves. My work now is running a small charity called Margaret's Lantern, Her Lantern. We support isolated seniors in the area, prescription costs, rides to appointments, community lunches. None of them know that behind those steady grants is a woman who was once abandoned by her own family. Aunt Ruth is my closest companion. She doesn't manage the foundation, but every Sunday morning she comes by with a basket of pastries and 2 cups of orange juice, and we sort through letters asking for help, reading each line like opening the chapters of quiet lives. One morning in October, while I was trimming the mums by the porch, the phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, letting a moment of silence pass like the many calls I never answered before. But I picked up. Brooklyn, my mother's voice was hoarse. Your father, he had a stroke. He's in the ICU. Insurance won't cover everything. They need a deposit of $30,000 to continue treatment. I went still. Richard had never been a real father to me, but deep down there was a sliver of childhood where he taught me to ride a bike and patted my shoulder when I failed a 6th-grade math test. I didn't say much. I just asked for the hospital's name. The next morning, I sent the money. No name attached, no note. I just wanted him treated as a human being. A few months later, Ethan called. His voice trembled, like someone waking from a long fog. Brooke, can you help me this time? I want to go to rehab. I mean it. I'm tired. I don't want to disappoint Mom anymore. But I don't have the money. I was quiet for a long time. Ethan, do you remember the last time you told me to stop bringing up the credit card you stole? He exhaled. I know. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. But 3 days later, his treatment costs were fully covered. An organization called Phoenix Wells sponsored him. He never knew the person behind it was the one he'd mocked as the family burden. Every call from the family after that carried the same familiar tone, an excuse, followed by a hint at money. I quietly refused them all. No anger, no lectures. I simply stopped, being that person for them. Surprisingly, I didn't feel sad. Once, Madison texted, "If you don't want to help, just say it. I'm tired of guessing how you feel." I didn't respond. I just sat by the window for a long time, watching sunlight draw a warm gold strip across my teacup. I thought, maybe when a person no longer needs anyone's approval, that's when they truly find where they belong. Aunt Ruth often says, Money doesn't change people, it just reveals what was already there. I feel that truth deeply. Not because I saw my mother's true face, or Richard's brazenness, or Ethan's endless victim act, but because I finally saw myself through every choice, every quiet act of forgiveness, every unseen kindness. One Friday morning, I went to the senior center with a big heart-shaped cookie and a basket of yarn for Miss Ellie, who'd lived alone for 40 years. She hugged me, tears spilling down. "You make me believe there's still kindness in the kind world." I smiled and said nothing. Because I knew that while I thought I was giving, they, the forgotten ones, were giving me something much bigger. Peace. Every night, before turning out the lights, I look at a small photo by my bookshelf, Aunt Ruth and me on an early spring picnic, laughing on a green lawn with glasses of lemonade. I don't need much. I don't need the whole world to recognize or love me. I just need one person who's true, and a quiet place to be myself. This little house, this foundation, these elders with their long, winding stories, and a hot cup of tea on an autumn afternoon, these are worth more to me than any number in a bank account. And I know I didn't just inherit an estate. I inherited something bigger, freedom. The freedom to live without begging for love from those who don't deserve it. The freedom to choose love on my own terms freely, without conditions. I live slowly now, but my heart is no longer snagged on the question I used to ask, over and over, why did they do that to me? Now I only ask, am I living true to my values? And every morning, when I wake to birds outside my window and the smell of baked goods Aunt Ruth left behind, I know the answer is always, yes. What do you think about my story? Have you ever been in a situation like mine, abandoned by your own family when you needed them most? Or kept quiet and swallowed your feelings, only to realize that silence brought nothing but hurt? I'm not telling this story to complain or demand justice. I'm sharing it to say this: sometimes the most precious thing isn't money, it's clarity. It's the moment you face reality and accept that not everyone who shares your blood is meant to walk beside you, and that you have every right to choose your own family, even if that family is just one person, like my Aunt Ruth. Life isn't always fair, but it always gives us a chance to move beyond pain if we're brave enough to face it and patient enough to live honestly with ourselves. If you've been through something similar, or you're struggling with unanswered questions within your family, share your story. What feels deeply personal to you might be exactly what helps someone else feel understood. And if you want to keep following along with me through more honest, moving, and sometimes surprising stories about family, life, and the journey back to yourself, don't forget to follow the channel. Who knows, maybe the next story is the one you've been waiting for.